It's been a little bit since I've done one of these videos, but I want to talk about something called block practice versus training ugly. And what I'd like to think is that ultimately what coaches and teachers are tasked with is playing the long game. It's developing skills that will travel, that won't be forgotten, that have this sustaining power. And block practice lives in the short game model. So what a block practice is basically get through the curriculum, get through it in a standard amount of time, cover one thing, test on that thing, cover another thing, test on that thing, cover another thing, right, and so on and so forth. And then what happens is by the time you get to the end, the things that you covered first, you have since forgotten. And it isn't that the squares are less important than the stars. It's just that the squares were covered before the stars. And now that time has elapsed, we've since forgotten what it was that we were supposed to know. And the short game model lives on these artificial moments in time where we say this is when you need to prove that you're competent with your skills, right? So it could be a test day on a Thursday, it could be a midterm exam, it could be a final exam, but there comes a moment in time where you have to prove what it is you know. And we're often seduced into thinking that when they know it, they've actually learned it. And that's a short game model. And what we know is that it just because you know it in the short run doesn't guarantee that you're going to remember it in the long run. And that you can achieve success with this model just by memorizing things, right? Sometimes I call that the GPS model. Is that just because you arrived doesn't mean you learned how to get there. You've just followed some scripts, followed some routine, and we're led to believe that you've actually learned it when all you've done is followed some procedure. But the long game, this idea of training ugly, training. The reason I believe it's called training ugly is because you don't win the short game. You actually don't even take the test in the short game because in the long game, you know the test is down the road. The test could be for a different coach on a different team. It could be in a different class than your class. It's giving them skills that they can travel. And the training ugly model says everything's important, right? Like our test is the real world. It's these authentic trials that pop up, and we have to have enough skills to handle it. And I don't know if the square is more important than the star, but I'm going to give you as much as I can, and I'm going to space these out because what we know is the more that you space them out, the more likely it is that you'll forget. And that's actually a really good thing when you're playing the long game because when you forget it, then that brings into your awareness that I need to learn it. I need to know it. I forgot it. So the more times you retrieve it, the more you remember it. And here, you don't have to retrieve it because you memorize it. It isn't this lost thing that you have to recover. But when you're playing the long game, you're training ugly. What you actually want are you want moments in time where you struggle trying to remember what it is. What's this concept I'm trying to remember? And then the more you struggle trying to get it, the more you lock it in. And coaches know this. Coaches know that this is true. That our final exam is our championships. We want our guys playing their best at the end of a season. And unfortunately, a lot of times in school we run a blocked practice curriculum, and then we get to the end, and then we have to curve the final because we never trained up. We didn't cycle through all the important stuff in almost a random model. We did it in a structured model, let them forget, give them a final, and then curve the final. And coaches can't function under that model. They have to make sure that their guys are understanding as they go because the game presents unpredictable challenges. So just something to be aware of: short game, long game, block practice versus training of.